God, creator, redeemer, and sustainer. Amen. Please be seated. We are witnesses. Today is the second Sunday of Easter. We begin our 50 days of the Easter season today. This year we find ourselves immersed in John's Gospel for the entire season. We have 3 Sundays in which we hear about encounters with the resurrected Jesus. In John, we move from the empty tomb to physical encounters with the risen Christ, beginning, as we heard last week, with Mary Magdalene's encounter with Jesus outside the empty tomb. Joe reminded us last week that Mary was the first to see, believe, and to try to share the incredible news. The tomb was empty. Jesus was standing there with Mary, unrecognized by her until he spoke her name, Mary. It was at that moment of recognition that resurrection became real for her. Still, when she tried to share and to witness what she now knew, she was not believed. Peter had to run and check it out for himself. He saw the tomb and 2 strangers, and though he was amazed, I suspect the resurrection and all of its implications did not become real for him until the upper room, that same night when Jesus suddenly appeared and spoke to all of them. They were gathered in the room, locked in fear. They had heard Mary's story. They had heard what the other woman had come to tell them early in the morning, and still they were locked in fear. Even when Jesus first appears to all of them, some thought they were seeing a ghost. Like Mary, who did not recognize Jesus at first, they couldn't see and know what was happening to them. He was only an ethereal apparition until they saw his hands and the wound in his side. Then they rejoiced, and Jesus spoke to them, "Peace be with you." And as John tells us, they received the Spirit that night. In John's telling of the story, they did not have to wait 50 days. And Thomas was not there. He had to wait a week. Thomas, through his own hesitation, needed to touch, to see for himself. The witnesses of others was not enough, just as the witness of the women was not enough. Jesus comes again a week later, and suddenly he is there. Standing before Thomas, he tells Thomas to reach out and touch his wounds. And Thomas has the opportunity to reach out, to touch, and see. And then it feels like this is a moment when everything else in that room falls away. Something happens for Thomas. There is nothing in the story that says he reached out and touched Jesus. Instead, we have this light-filled moment of recognition. And Thomas cries out, "My Lord, my God!" Thomas now believed. And Jesus says to him, and actually to all who had doubted him, who had not yet believed in the resurrection until they too had had their moment of recognition, Jesus says to them, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet come to believe." Jesus is speaking to us. What do we believe? How have we come to believe? Henri Nouwen wrote about God's faithfulness and what he thought of the resurrection. The resurrection does not solve our problems about dying and death. It is not the happy ending to our life story, nor is it the big surprise that God has kept in store for us. No, the resurrection is the expression of God's faithfulness to Jesus and to all God's children. Through the resurrection, God has said to Jesus, "You are indeed my beloved Son, and my love is everlasting." And to us, God has said, "You are indeed my beloved children, and my love is everlasting." The resurrection is God's way of revealing to us that nothing that belongs to God will ever go to waste. What belongs to God will never get lost, not even our mortal bodies. The resurrection does not answer any of our curious questions about life after death, such as, how will it be? How will it look? But it does reveal to us that indeed love is stronger than death. After that revelation, we must remain silent, leave the whys, the wheres, the hows, and whens behind, and simply trust. Richard Rohr wrote, I like to think of the resurrection as God's way of telling us that God can take the worst thing in the world, the killing of the God-human Jesus, and change it into the best thing, the redemption of the world. Resurrection and renewal are, in fact, the universal and observable patterns of everything. The risen Christ is not a one-time miracle, but the revelation of a universal pattern that is hard to see in the short run. Our job is to figure out not the how or when of resurrection, but just the what. Love is the energy that sustains the universe, moving us toward resurrection. Each season of the church and its relevant scripture readings invites us to reflection, invites us to dig deeper into what it means to be a believer. With Easter, we have the resurrection to think about, to pray with, and to act on, to witness to in our lives. What do we believe? Are we ever like Thomas, needing to see, to feel something that will make the unbelievable believable? What are we witnesses to? What have we seen, known, experienced? Have we seen any of that, of the risen Christ for ourselves? We can see signs of the resurrection each spring. It's a beautiful spring this year, when dormant bulbs and seeds find their way to the surface and begin to grow and bloom again. And the dead branches of trees and bushes sprout buds, which bring leaves, and in some cases, flowers. Life abounds around us. New life is growing and flourishing from what was. A caterpillar, a cocoon, a butterfly. We can see them in each stage of their life, and we see them as signs of new and transformed life. Resurrection is more than an empty tomb with linen cloths left there and the light of two dazzling figures, angel messengers. Resurrection is all around us, waiting for us to see, to know God's ever-present promise of love and life. What is it that helps us to see, to know? So one of my favorite stories, which I suspect some of you may have heard or perhaps even read to a child or grandchild, is the story of the Velveteen Rabbit. How many of you know that? Pretty good. It's by Marjorie Williams. And it is the story of a beautiful velveteen rabbit with pink sateen ears that was given to a little boy at Christmas and then forgotten, until one day the little boy's nanny gave it to him to hug. And then it was loved and hugged until his velveteen fur was worn and his ears torn and he was tattered. The rabbit had a best friend in the nursery, the wise old Skin Horse. One day, Rabbit asked Skin Horse, "What is real?" The Skin Horse told the rabbit, "Real isn't how you are made. It is something that happens to you. When a child loves you a really long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." The rabbit worries if it will hurt. And the Skin Horse says, "Sometimes it does, but when you are real, you don't mind being hurt." The story goes on from there. Rabbit keeps the little boy company when he becomes sick with scarlet fever. When the boy recovers, the rabbit is put into the trash to be burned because of the germs. Before that happens, Rabbit sheds a real tear, from which a fairy appears and makes him a real bunny with back legs to hop. And months later, he visits the little boy in the garden with his other real rabbit friends. And the little boy sees him and recognizes him. He looks like my old bunny that I lost when I had scarlet fever. The child was the one who first helped him become real. The rabbit was loved into being real. Sometimes, we need to be loved into being real. Sometimes resurrection comes when we are worn out, burning the candle at both ends, just steps away from burnout, and someone reaches out and gives us a hug. Someone helps us to fix what is broken. Someone offers to carry a load for us, lends an ear to listen to just be there with us. And in those moments, we catch glimpses of the resurrection and all of the love that God pours out and into us, loving us into being real. Resurrection lives inside of us, each of us, waiting there, dormant at some times, and sometimes quivering inside with questions, waiting to be seen, to be known. Resurrection is here and now. Amen.